There is a place where the ocean breathes in unison, where millions of bodies move as a single conscious organism, where the line between the individual and the collective simply disappears. Raja Ampat, in the heart of the Indonesian Coral Triangle, harbors the most hypnotic phenomenon of tropical seas. Shoals so dense, so perfectly synchronized that they defy the logic of physics and transform water into liquid architecture. Scientists estimate that in a single swirling formation, more than 500,000 fish can move with millimeter precision, creating patterns that no computer could replicate. What you are about to discover is not just beautiful, it's impossible. And it's happening right now as you read these words in the most marine-rich waters on the planet. The chevron barracuda, Sphaerina keeni, doesn't hunt alone in Raja Ampat. It conspires. When the sun reaches exactly 45 degrees above the equatorial horizon, thousands of these silvery predators emerge from the depths like living spears, forming vertical spirals that extend 30 meters high. Each individual measures up to 1 meter and 80 centimeters of pure hydrodynamic muscle, equipped with jaws that open 120 degrees, and serrated teeth capable of cutting flesh with the efficiency of surgical scalpels. The school spins counterclockwise, creating a vortex that sucks plankton, smaller fish, and even unsuspecting divers into the center of a deadly dance. Marine biologists call this formation the silver tornado. Local fishermen call it the mouth of the sea. No one knows exactly why it happens, but everyone agrees. Those who witness it never forget the sound these creatures make when their scales rub together at breakneck speed, a metallic whisper that echoes through the currents like the rustling of thousands of blades being sharpened simultaneously. Raja Ampat is an archipelago of 1,515 islands spread across 40,000 square kilometers between West Papua and the Halmahera Sea. Here, 4 major ocean currents collide like invisible rivers, transporting nutrients from the abyssal depths of the Pacific to reefs that concentrate 75% of all coral species known to science. The water temperature oscillates between 27 and 29 degrees Celsius throughout the year, creating perfect conditions for explosions of biodiversity that transform every cubic meter of ocean into an underwater metropolis. Above the surface, limestone cliffs covered in tropical forests rise like green cathedrals, while great frigate birds, Fragata minor, and red-footed boobies, Sula sula, patrol the skies in search of flying fish that escape from the shoals below. The cycle is perfect. The system is ancient. And it all begins with the impossible synchronization of creatures that individually possess brains smaller than a pea, but collectively exhibit intelligence that rivals supercomputers. The big-eye trevally, Caranx sexfasciatus, has eyes that occupy a third of its head, adapted to detect movement in waters with visibility of only 2 meters during plankton storms that occur between November and March. When hundreds of thousands of these fish gather at the tips of the Raja Ampat promontories, something extraordinary happens. They form perfect spheres, geometric structures so precise that they seem to have been designed by mathematicians. Each sphere can contain up to 200,000 individuals, all swimming at exactly 15 kilometers per hour, maintaining a constant distance of 3 centimeters from each other. The formation rotates slowly, exposing different layers to the sun for collective thermoregulation, while predators such as gray reef sharks, Carcharhinus amblyrhynchos, circle helplessly, unable to penetrate the living wall of silvery bodies that reflect light like moving mirrors. Researchers recently discovered that these jacks emit low-frequency ultrasonic clicks to maintain group cohesion, creating a symphony inaudible to human ears, but which transforms the ocean into a giant neural network where information travels faster than any predator can swim. The giant trevally, Caranx ignobilis, is different. It's the gladiator of the reefs, capable of reaching 1 meter and 70 centimeters in length and weighing up to 80 kilograms of explosive muscle. These silvery titans don't form schools for protection, but for cooperative hunting strategy. On the vertical walls that descend to 300 meters deep around Missoul Island, groups of 20 to 50 giant trevally work like sea lions, surrounding schools of stingrays and executing coordinated attacks with military precision. The group leader, always the largest male, emits bursts of acceleration that create pressure waves detectable 50 meters away, signaling the exact moment of attack. What makes this truly surreal is the speed. From 0 to 70 kilometers per hour in less than 2 seconds, an acceleration that would generate enough G-force to knock a human unconscious. When the school of fish attacks, the water explodes in white foam, scales fly like silver confetti, and for a few seconds it's impossible to distinguish predator from prey, just a tornado of life in frenetic motion that ends as abruptly as it began, leaving only silence and the current carrying scales to the depths. The batfish, Platax TERRA, floats. It doesn't swim, it doesn't glide. It floats like fallen leaves in slow motion, its expanded pectoral fins forming wings that can span up to 60 centimeters in fully developed adults. When hundreds of these animals gather in the shallow bays of Dampier Strait during the August full moon, the ocean transforms into an underwater ballet of hypnotic elegance. Juveniles mimic dead mangrove leaves with photographic perfection, swaying gently with the currents as they feed on microscopic invertebrates that float like invisible snow. Adults, with their silvery bodies marked by vertical stripes that disappear and reappear depending on their mood and the light, form horizontal layers that extend from the surface to 15 meters deep. The school moves in slow waves, creating a visual effect of silken curtains being stirred by underwater breezes. Divers report feeling like they are floating in outer space, surrounded by alien entities that study the intruders with large, curious eyes, before returning to their eternal dance, indifferent to the human presence, absorbed in a ritual whose purpose remains mysterious, even to scientists who have dedicated decades to studying this inexplicable behavior. Raja Ampat receives 250 centimeters of rain annually, unevenly distributed throughout the wet season that dominates from May to September, transforming the coastal forests into vertical waterfalls that pour nutrient-rich freshwater directly into the sea. This mixture creates salinity gradients ranging from 35 parts per thousand in deep ocean waters to 22 parts per thousand at river mouths, creating invisible layers that fish use as chemical highways for navigation. The limestone islands, formed by tectonic uplift over the last 20 million years, harbor underwater caves where freshwater from underground aquifers meets saltwater, creating haloclines so clear they appear as liquid mirrors floating in the middle of the ocean. Above, great frigate birds glide on rising thermal currents generated by the warming of the forests. Their wingspans of 2 meters and 40 centimeters, allowing them to remain airborne for weeks without touching land or sea, sleeping in flight while their brains alternate hemispheres, one awake, one asleep, in a cycle that never stops, just like the schools of fish below that never rest completely, always keeping part of the group vigilant while others feed or navigate the night currents. The red snapper, Lucanus bohar, is a creature of violent contrasts. Its scarlet body, which can reach 90 centimeters in length, shines like living blood against the deep blue of the open ocean. But it is in the schools of Raja Ampat that this fish reveals its true character. Hundreds of individuals congregate on the outer edges of the reefs, where currents of up to 3 knots carry plankton and juvenile fish like invisible aerial rivers. The school forms fractal structures, patterns that repeat themselves at different scales, with smaller groups of 5 to 10 individuals orbiting larger nuclei of 50 to 100 fish, all connected by some communication mechanism that science has not yet fully deciphered. When a predator approaches, the formation contracts instantly, becoming a solid mass of red scales that pulsates like a giant heart beating in perfect synchrony. Toxicologists have discovered that larger red snappers accumulate ciguatoxin from dinoflagellate algae that grow on dead corals, making them poisonous for human consumption, a chemical defense that adds an extra layer of protection to an animal that already dominates its environment through numbers, speed, and coordination that defies rational explanation. The blue snapper, Lucanus casmira, is the poet of the reefs. Its horizontal yellow and blue stripes create optical patterns that confuse predators when the school moves at top speed, transforming hundreds of individual fish into a single striped entity that appears much larger than it actually is. At dawn, between 5:30 and 6 a.m., Thousands of blue snappers emerge from caves and crevices where they spent the night, forming clouds that spread across the reefs like blue and gold smoke. They feed on zooplankton that rises from the depths during the night, capturing microscopic organisms with surgical precision while maintaining a constant defensive formation. The sound they produce is surprising. Clicks generated by a modified pharynx that function as biological sonar, allowing the school to navigate turbid waters with the same precision it would exhibit under full sun. When threatened by barracudas or king mackerel, Scomberomoris commerson, the school performs a maneuver called a flash burst by researchers. All the fish simultaneously rotate 90 degrees, exposing their silvery sides that reflect sunlight in a blinding pulse, disorienting attackers long enough for the group to escape to deeper waters, leaving only trails of shimmering scales floating like golden snow in the current. Yellowfin tuna, Terres, are the embodiment of pure speed. Their fusiform, torpedo-shaped bodies, 30 centimeters long, capable of sustaining speeds of 25 kilometers per hour for consecutive hours, patrol the strong current zones between islands like air squadrons in close formation. Their lemon-yellow scales reflect ultraviolet light invisible to the human eye, but perfectly visible to other tuna, creating visual signals that coordinate the movements of schools that can contain more than 100,000 individuals. The preferred formation is called a blade by marine biologists. A vertical wall of fish only 3 meters thick, but extending 50 meters in length and 20 meters in height, cutting through the water like a golden guillotine, intercepting zooplankton carried by the currents. What makes this structure truly extraordinary is its selective permeability. Small predators are ignored, allowed to pass through the school without reaction, while larger threats cause waves of movement that propagate through the formation at speeds greater than the individual swimming speed, a phenomenon that physicists compare to compression waves in solids, suggesting that the school behaves more like elastic material than as a collection of independent organisms. The electric blue tang, Caesiopyroloria, is a sight to behold. Its cobalt blue back glows with an almost artificial intensity, a result of guanine crystals deposited in microscopic layers that interfere with specific wavelengths of sunlight. When thousands of these 25-centimeter fish form schools on the vertical walls of Mosul, the visual effect is of liquid neon pulsing in the depths. Unlike their yellow cousins, electric blue tangs prefer waters between 15 and 40 meters deep, where sunlight penetrates at angles that maximize the structural glow of their scales. During spawning rituals that occur 3 days after a full moon, the school spirals upwards, releasing millions of transparent eggs that float like invisible bubbles until they reach the surface, where currents disperse them over hundreds of square kilometers. Males perform competitive displays, intensifying their coloration through controlled vascular expansion that makes the blue pulse like underwater strobe lights. Females evaluate suitors not by the most intense color, but by the most perfect synchronicity with the movements of the school, favoring males that demonstrate a superior capacity for collective integration, perpetuating genes that value cooperation over individualism, evolutionarily shaping a species where the collective literally becomes more important than the individual. The striped surgeonfish, Acanthurus lineatus, is armed. Retractable, scalpel-sharp spines on either side of the caudal base are capable of causing deep cuts in human flesh and are lethal to other fish. These 38-centimeter herbivores, decorated with horizontal blue and yellow stripes that create the illusion of perpetual motion, even when stationary, form armies of 1,000 to 5,000 individuals that march across the reefs like living lawnmowers. The school moves in an organized front, each fish nibbling filamentous algae with specialized teeth that scrape rocky surfaces like biological sandpaper, leaving trails of clean coral that shine white under the sun, before being recolonized by new generations of algae in a cycle that has repeated itself for millions of years. When territories are disputed with other schools of surgeonfish, epic battles unfold. Hundreds of fish on each side collide in clouds of torn scales and extended spines, creating underwater storms of controlled violence where deaths are rare, but there are always clear winners. The defeated school retreats in an orderly fashion, maintaining formation even in retreat, while the victors immediately resume feeding as if nothing had happened, demonstrating an ability to alternate between completely distinct behavioral modes with a speed that suggests collective cognitive processing far more sophisticated than the individual brains of these animals could handle. Raja Ampat marks the junction of three constantly moving tectonic plates. The Pacific Plate subducts beneath the Philippine Plate at approximately 7 centimeters per year, generating underwater tremors that restructure reefs and create new habitats on geological timescales. Inactive submarine volcanoes dot the ocean floor at depths of 2,000 meters, their slopes covered by gardens of black coral, Antipathes spp. That grow 1 centimeter per decade, some specimens being over 400 years old, silent witnesses to centuries of evolution of the schools of fish that dance in the waters above. The tidal currents in Raja Ampat are among the strongest on the planet, reaching speeds of 5 knots during spring tides, transporting volumes of water equivalent to 100 Amazon rivers through the straits between islands, creating kilometer-scale whirlpools that are visible from space. Red-footed boobies dive into these currents at 80-degree angles, penetrating the surface at speeds of 90 kilometers per hour. Their cranial air sacs absorbing impact that would break human bones, emerging seconds later with beaks full of sardines caught 15 meters deep, demonstrating that the perfect synchronization between different species is not a coincidence, but the result of millions of years of coevolution in one of the most productive and competitive environments on the planet. The hammerhead parrotfish, Bulbometapon muricatum, is a colossus, the largest of the parrotfish, capable of reaching 1 meter and 30 centimeters and weighing up to 70 kilograms, with a bulbous head that resembles a living anvil and teeth fused into a beak that can crush coral with a force of 260 kilograms per square centimeter. When groups of 20 to 40 of these green titans gather on the shallow reefs of Raja Ampat at dawn, the sound is impossible to ignore. Crunch, 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 like wood being broken repeatedly, echoing through the water in a percussion that can be heard 100 meters away. They feed on live coral, biting off pieces of calcareous skeleton, extracting polyps and symbiotic algae, then excreting fine sand that settles on the bottom, creating white beaches that tourists admire without realizing they are walking on billions of tons of processed parrotfish feces accumulated over millennia. The school of fish sleeps in caves, enveloped in cocoons of mucus that each individual secretes to mask its scent from nocturnal predators, waking precisely at the first ray of sunlight that penetrates the water, synchronized by biological clocks adjusted with minute-by-minute precision, beginning another day of systematic reef demolition that paradoxically keeps the ecosystem healthy by preventing the domination of unique coral species. Tropical sardines, Sardinella spp. Are at the base of the pyramid. Small, rarely exceeding 15 centimeters, they form impossibly dense shoals. Researchers estimate up to 2 million individuals per shoal in the coastal waters of Raja Ampat during seasonal breeding peaks between February and April. These silvery masses move like liquid entities, instantly changing shape in response to threats. Spheres, cylinders, walls, spirals, each formation optimized to confuse specific predators. When red-footed boobies dive from the sky, the shoal splits into concentric rings, creating empty tunnels that the birds pass through without catching a single sardine. When trevally attack horizontally, the mass flattens vertically, becoming so thin that predators pass through without being able to open their mouths quickly enough. But the most extraordinary defense occurs when whale sharks, Rhincodon typus, appear during their June migrations. Sardines cluster around the mouth of the harmless giant, using the 20-ton filter feeder as a living shield against smaller predators that dare not approach the largest fish in the ocean. This temporary symbiosis benefits both. Sardines gain protection, whale sharks gain an easy meal of plankton concentrated around the school, demonstrating that in Raja Ampat, even predator-prey relationships follow more complex rules than anywhere else on the planet. The rainbow trevally, Elegatis bipinulata, is pure speed transformed into life. Its hydrodynamic torpedo-shaped body, capable of reaching 1 meter and 20 centimeters in length, is decorated with horizontal blue, yellow, and silver stripes that create visual interference patterns when the fish moves at high speed, making it impossible for predators to calculate its precise trajectory. These pelagic fish form small groups of 10 to 30 individuals that patrol open waters between Raja Ampat and the Banda Sea, covering up to 150 kilometers a day in search of schools of squid and flying fish. When they locate prey, the group executes a maneuver called orbital launch by observers. They accelerate to 60 kilometers per hour, approach the school from below, then rise vertically in a synchronized spiral that cuts through the mass of prey like living drills, each jack capturing multiple targets during a single ascent that can lift them 3 meters above the water's surface before an explosive re-entry that creates plumes of foam visible for kilometers. Local fishermen call this behavior the lightning dance and consider sightings as harbingers of impending storms, a correlation that recent studies partially confirm. Rainbow jacks detect changes in atmospheric pressure associated with weather systems, altering hunting patterns 24 hours before storms hit the region. The ocean currents of Raja Ampat are the veins of a planetary organism. The South Equatorial Current carries cold, nutrient-rich waters from the Central Pacific Ocean, colliding with the New Guinea Current flowing westward along the southern coast of the main island, creating upwelling zones where water 400 meters deep rises to euphotic layers, carrying nitrogen and phosphorus compounds that fuel phytoplankton blooms visible from orbiting satellites. These microscopic blooms support food chains that culminate in unparalleled concentrations of top predators. Up to 15 different species of sharks can be found simultaneously on a single reef, competing and cooperating in complex hierarchies where size does not determine dominance, but rather specialization and timing. Above, great frigate birds establish nesting colonies on remote islands, males inflating red gular pouches the size of party balloons during courtship displays that last 8 consecutive hours, competing for the attention of females who assess not only pouch size, but also the male's ability to maintain constant inflation under equatorial sun that raises the surface temperature of the rocks to 52 degrees Celsius. Testing physical endurance in an environment that does not tolerate weakness. Raja Ampat breathes in lunar cycles. During the new moon, when low tides expose reefs that normally remain submerged, ghost crabs, Ocypode spp, emerge by the millions from the white sand beaches, their translucent carapaces almost invisible under starlight, performing synchronized mating rituals that cover miles of coastline with undulating movement that seems to transform the land into churning sea. 3 days after the full moon, corals, Acropora spp, Pochilopora spp, Imantipora spp, simultaneously and explosively release trillions of gametes in a mass spawning event that tints the water pink and white, creating underwater blizzards of potential life that attract filter feeders from all depths. Whale sharks appear like ghost ships, their open mouths 1.5 meters in diameter, processing tons of egg-laden water per hour. Giant manta rays, Mobula birostris, with wingspans of 7 meters, glide through the clouds of gametes in an aquatic ballet of impossible grace for creatures so massive. And the schools, all the schools, alter their behavior in ways that scientists are only beginning to document. Barracudas form tighter spirals, snappers aggregate in greater densities, and fusileros rise to shallower waters. The entire ocean pulsates to a rhythm dictated by the gravitational force of a satellite orbiting 384,000 kilometers away, reminding us that marine life does not exist in isolation, but is connected to cosmic systems much larger than any individual organism. Raja Ampat schools of fish are not merely random groupings of fish seeking protection in numbers. They are emergent superorganisms, entities where the whole literally transcends the sum of its parts, exhibiting properties that no single individual possesses in isolation. Distributed cognition, collective decision-making, shared memory passed down through generations not by genes, but by social learning that allows young fish, never having seen a specific predator, to react appropriately the first time they encounter it, because the school's knowledge persists independently of the survival. Of specific individuals. Neuroscientists studying these phenomena have discovered that schools of fish process information in a way analogous to artificial neural networks, with each fish acting as a neuron that receives inputs from neighbors, processes them according to simple rules, transmits outputs that influence others, creating emergent intelligence that resides not in individual brains, but in the pattern of connections between them. This discovery is revolutionizing fields ranging from swarm robotics to consciousness theory, suggesting that mind may exist on a much more distributed substrate than we traditionally assume, and that Raja Ampat may harbor not only the greatest biodiversity of corals on the planet, but also forms of collective intelligence that we do not yet know how to define or measure adequately. As the sun dips into the Halmahera Sea, tinging the water orange and purple, the schools of fish in Raja Ampat perform their final daytime choreography. Chevron barracudas descend in ever slower spirals until they disappear into the deep blue darkness of the depths. Trevally return to the caves that guard their dormant forms during the dark hours. Fusiliers disperse in small family groups, seeking shelter in coral crevices. Each species follows an ancestral protocol refined over millions of generations, optimized beyond the capacity of any human engineer to improve. And tomorrow, at dawn, it will all begin again. The dance, the hunt, the impossible synchronicity of millions of individual lives choosing every second cooperation over competition, the collective over the individual. Raja Ampat does not selfishly keep this secret. The waters here teach a fundamental lesson. Survival does not belong to the strongest or fastest, but to the most connected. To those who understand that in an infinitely complex world, deeper beauty emerges when countless small parts decide to move as one. This wisdom flows with the currents beyond these islands, carried by larvae that drift across oceans, eventually establishing new colonies, new schools of fish, new life pulsing in synchrony that spreads across the planet like an aquatic heartbeat. You witnessed something that 99% of humanity will never see in person. Leave a like if these living walls of Raja Ampat redefined your concept of possible. Subscribe to discover other oceanic phenomena that science still can't fully explain, but which continue to happen, indifferent to our understanding, magnificent in their complexity, and terrifying in their fragility, because each school of fish you saw here depends on such a delicate balance that a water temperature rising by just 1 degree Celsius can destabilize synchronizations built over ages. Share this knowledge. Leave a comment about which school of fish impacted you the most and why. And remember, while you return to the dry surface of your earthly life, down below, in the waters of the coral triangle, millions of bodies continue dancing in darkness, waiting for the next dawn to restart the eternal ritual that existed before humans walked on Earth, and that, with our collective luck and wisdom, will continue long after we are gone.